Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the jury in the Emma Caldwell murder trial is told the accused committed a litany of appalling offences against vulnerable women. Ian Packer denies 36 offences against 25 women, including Emma's murder. A man appears in court charged with drugs, explosives and firearms offences after a police operation in the West End of Glasgow. Meaningless twaddle. One councillor's verdict on the government's plan to commit £180,000 to combat rural depopulation.
Not another focus group, not another strategy. Just get on and do some basic improvements that will actually start to attract people to come here.
Also in tonight's programme, a drug which could improve survival rates for an aggressive type of cancer. Mesothelioma is usually linked to asbestos exposure and is most common in people who've worked in industry, but that's changing.
And coming up in the sport, we'll hear from a Premiership manager who'd rather spend his club's VAR budget on new players.
Hello, I'm Sally Magnus and welcome to Friday's programme. A jury has been told that the man accused of murdering Emma Caldwell committed a litany of appalling offences against 25 women. In its closing speech, the prosecution said Ian Packer's violence had escalated horribly with the killing of Emma in 2005. Our Home Affairs correspondent David Cowan has more.
As Ian Packer's trial draws to a close, the prosecution told the jury he was an incorrigible user of sex workers with a propensity for serious violence and strangulation. The Advocate Depute Richard Goddard KC said, "We have evidence from 25 women from all different backgrounds and walks of life, speaking to crimes of assault, indecent assault and rape, all committed by the same man over a period of 26 years. That man is Ian Packer, and that man told you that all of them are liars. The evidence tells us that Ian Packer is a sexually violent man and has been for most of his adult life." The prosecutor said the charges before the High Court involve a cluster of alleged attacks on Glasgow prostitutes between 2004 and 2006, when Ian Packer was, in his words, at his most active. He said there had been an extraordinary turn of events during cross-examination when Ian Packer appeared to accept he was guilty of indecently assaulting Emma Caldwell 8 months before she died. Richard Goddard told the jury that if they looked at all the evidence, a clear picture would emerge. He said Ian Packer had committed a litany of appalling offences against vulnerable young women, a truly disgraceful course of criminal conduct over 2 decades, escalating horribly with the murder of Emma Caldwell. The jury was told that Ian Packer's violence against women was characterised by seizing hold of their neck and throat and choking them. The 51-year-old has denied strangling Emma Caldwell with his hands in a cable. Richard Goddard said he will list 17 circumstances from the evidence that will prove his guilt. The closing speeches continue on Monday. David Cowan, Reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
The Scottish Labour leader has said it's time to end what he called the unbearable nightmare of the Conservative government. Anas Sarwal also said the Labour Party could bring back hope to the country. He was speaking at his party's spring conference in Glasgow, where, to applause, he repeated his call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. From the conference, here's our political correspondent, Andrew Kerr.
Labour conferences have felt a bit low-key in the past. Not now. There's a new energy here. A warm welcome for the Scottish leader, with international affairs high on the agenda.
So today, I once again say loudly and clearly, the fighting must stop right now. That means an immediate ceasefire with an end to rocket fire going into and coming out of Gaza.
But how to achieve that, still causing tensions in the party. And this pledge.
We must always have a zero-tolerance approach to anti-Semitism and Islamophobia.
Then the leader switched his focus to ousting the Conservative government.
What an unbearable nightmare. So it falls on us, and only us, the Labour Party, to bring back hope for our country. And the sooner we get rid of this entire shower of Tories, the better.
He appealed to pro-independence voters to come to Labour.
no idea how to govern, pitting voter against voter, mired in scandal, breaking public services, a track record of failure in government. It's not just the Tories we're talking about. It's also the perfect description of the SNP.
Vote Scottish Labour. That's what change means. That's why change matters. Let's go make that change happen. Thank you.
Anas Sarwar says change matters. This party is hungry for change. They can almost taste the power. Unstoppable rings around the hall. Labour hopes that's their theme for this general election campaign. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Our political correspondent David Wallace-Lockhart joins us now live from the conference stage. Anas Sarwar, of course, very aware that this is his last conference before a general election.
Yes, Ali, he knows there's going to be a general election within the next 12 months. This is an opportunity to pitch to voters. And his message is, if you're tired of the Conservative government at Westminster, then vote for Labour and, crucially, return Scottish Labour MPs who can have influence at a UK government level. And Anas Sarwar also appears to have one eye on the 2026 Scottish Parliament elections, because a lot of his speech today was about the opportunities, as he sees them, of governments at Holyrood and Westminster, both Labour, working together, and what that can ultimately deliver for Scots. Now, there's lots of confidence at this Scottish Labour conference. There's lots of businesses at this Scottish Labour conference, perhaps a sign that industry thinks Labour could be heading to Downing Street. But of course, to get there, to have a good result in Scotland, Anas Sarwar does need pro-independence voters probably to back his party. And that's a big ask for any Scottish Labour leader.
But there are still disagreements within Labour, not least Gaza.
That's right. There are a few issues on which Sir Keir Starmer and Anas Sarwar do appear to disagree. They tend to do so quite good-naturedly and quite agreeable, but they're disagreements nonetheless. And Gaza is one of those key issues. We heard there in Andrew's report Anas Sarwar calling for an immediate ceasefire. Sir Keir Starmer has not gone quite that far. They're on a slightly different message there. And a key question is, when this issue raises its head at Westminster next week, as it should do via an SNP motion, how exactly do Scottish Labour two MPs vote? Do they vote with Sir Keir Starmer, presumably not going quite so far, or do they vote with Anas Sarwar, who wants that immediate ceasefire? If they follow the whip of Sir Keir Starmer, and then the big question comes to be, with a general election looming, who exactly is in charge of Scottish Labour MPs once they get to Westminster?
David, thank you very much indeed. David Wallace-Lockhart there, reporting from Glasgow. And we'll be covering the other party conferences as they occur over the next few weeks. A 50-year-old man has appeared at Glasgow Sheriff Court charged with firearms, explosives and drugs offences. Shahzad Khan was arrested after a police operation in the Broomhill area of the city yesterday. He made no plea or declaration and will appear again. Aileen Clark reports.
Yesterday, police hurriedly evacuated a whole number of flats here on Broomhill Drive after what they described as a pre-planned search had uncovered, they said, a number of suspicious items. Now, a major operation got going here. This road was closed off, and as well as a heavy police presence here, there was also fire service and military explosive experts were seen here as well. Now, this man was one of those who had to flee their flat along with their family.
Yesterday, about 12:30, we were asked to leave the flat very, very quickly. Apparently, there'd been a discovery of some hazardous material, I think was the most of the description I got. No other description was given, and we were told to leave with pretty much no notice and just grab what we could and leave the flat immediately.
Today there's still a police presence here. There have been forensic officers working throughout the day in that first floor flat. Now, most residents have been allowed back into their homes. A small number have not been allowed back in yet, and we understand that is because a specialist contractor has to remove what I've heard described as a potentially hazardous substance from that first floor flat, and only when that is done will the other people be allowed to move back home. Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
The Scottish Government has announced funding of £180,000 to tackle depopulation across Scotland. A portion will go towards community settlement officers in some of the areas with the largest drops in population. A councillor in the far north has described the announcement as meaningless twaddle. Ian McInnes has more.
These are areas of outstanding beauty, but when it comes to population numbers, they are places in decline. It's widely accepted that rural and island communities face huge population challenges, but how to fix it is harder to define. Launching the Scottish Government's plan in Fort William today, the Migration Minister said their strategy would back locally led initiatives.
The Addressing Depopulation Fund is something I'm extremely excited about because it will allow local authorities to designate a particular area that they believe even a small amount of money could make a huge difference to attracting and retaining populations locally. And as it is a pilot, that will then give us really necessary information about how we can take future steps and what our next phase of work will look like to address depopulation.
The fund, totalling £180,000, will see community settlement officers established in Argyll and Bute, Highland and the Western Isles, with part funding from the Scottish Government. But some are unimpressed by the plans.
Frankly, it's meaningless twaddle. You know, I mean, has anyone actually heard of it? Does anyone actually understand what any of this means? You know, I don't think they do. And people say, please, not another focus group, not another strategy. Just get on and do some basic improvements that will actually start to attract people to come here.
Some, though, have been lucky enough to stay in the place they call home, unlike many of their peers. Ailey runs an online outdoor clothing business here in Lochaber, and she says the government's focus should be on keeping people here.
People have been talking about trying to encourage young people to come to the Highlands for a really long time. Young people want to live in the Highlands, they want to live here. I think with the housing situation and the jobs market to an extent, but really with the housing situation it's difficult for people to move here.
Individual projects which will receive funding will be announced later this year, but it's clear there's much work to be done yet to reverse years of population decline. Ian McInnes, reporting Scotland.
Tonight's main news again. The jury in the Emma Caldwell murder trial has heard the accused Ian Packer committed a litany of appalling offences.
Coming up in the sport, we'll hear from a Premiership manager who'd rather spend his club's VAR budget on new players.
Scientists and charities here have welcomed the development of a new drug for mesothelioma, an aggressive form of cancer that's usually linked to asbestos exposure. Research led by Queen Mary University in London suggests it could quadruple 3-year survival rates. Our reporter Katrina Renton has more.
Robert Hislop died in 2017 after being diagnosed with mesothelioma 16 months before.
Robert was he was a tradesman, he was a flooring contractor. Personality-wise, he was a hard-working guy. His family was really important to him, that was his number one. We got married, in fact, after a long time together. We got married in May 2015. He felt a bit unwell round about June, July in 2015. And he went to the doctor in late 2015, was diagnosed with mesothelioma in 2016 and was given 12 months to live.
Robert did not realise he had been in contact with asbestos in his working life. The diagnosis was devastating.
He had just turned 60. The usual time frame is 12 months, but because he was young and because he was very healthy, the oncologist felt that he would get a little bit longer, and in actual fact he did get an extra 4 months over the 12.
Mesothelioma is almost always caused by exposure to asbestos. Glasgow and Clydebank were home to many of the UK's busiest shipyards where asbestos was widely used. But with asbestos found in other workplaces, people from a range of backgrounds are affected. In a 2-year trial, it was found patients given the drug ADI PEG-20 survived around 7 weeks longer than those given a placebo drug. Today, the Board for Action on Asbestos was meeting in Glasgow and say while not a cure, it's an important development.
The demographic has changed. Now we're seeing young women who were teachers, who worked in nursery schools, We're seeing firemen, we're seeing policemen. So we're seeing a different demographic altogether. People seem to think it's all older men, but it's not.
Robert adored his grandsons. Rory was 7 when Robert died. Ethan was only 21 months. The new drug offers some hope to those with the diagnosis, where every day is precious.
For us, we would have had him longer, and his goal every day said to me, whatever they offer me, I'm taking, because I don't want Ethan to forget me. That was, yep.
Kathy Hislop there talking to our reporter Katrina Renton. Residents who were evacuated from an Edinburgh tenement block last month over safety fears say they're still facing an uncertain future. While a number of people in the Anchorfield flats were allowed to return home today, the properties worst affected by a large crack in the front of the building are still off limits. Edinburgh Council say engineers identified corroded metalwork as the source of the problem. They say there's no evidence that nearby tramworks have had any impact.
Clutching belongings they'd had to grab in a hurry, residents are once again allowed through the front door. 3 weeks ago, they were given 1 hour to evacuate, but the crack in the building that was deemed to be unsafe is now stabilised by heavy-duty scaffolding. For Lisanne, who rents a flat with her husband, it's a step in the right direction.
We didn't know when we'd be back, and so just having all those unknowns and having your home left behind and not being able to sleep in your own bed at night, ultimately, was difficult.
How was it getting back in today?
It was a big relief to get the news this week that we could go back.
But those in the worst affected properties were only allowed in to gather belongings, and flat owners are facing big repair bills. Edinburgh Council say engineers have identified the cause of the crack that opened up down the front of this building. An iron bracket that's been holding stonework in place for more than a century that corroded and failed. The survey's findings were being shared with residents who'd questioned whether the recently constructed tram line across the road contributed to their problems. Have the tram works played any part in what's happened here? Because that is one theory that has been discussed.
Yeah, I understand from the report it's a structural defect that relates to some build way back when these buildings were probably constructed potentially back as far back as the 1800s. There's no evidence of any impact of the tram works.
That claim will be tested in a separate investigation. What happened is a question residents want answered definitively to help determine what comes next. Stephen Gordon, reporting Scotland, Newhaven.
Lewis is here now, and guess what? It's our old friend VAR again.
Well, I've got a bit of snooker chat for you as well at some point in the sport, but yes, indeed, VAR is on the agenda. Thanks very much, Sally. Hello there. St Mirren manager Stephen Robinson says VAR is not worth the money the club spend on it, insisting the fee they fork out on the technology would be able to bring an extra 2 players to the club. Robinson's comments came after Scottish FA head of referee operations Crawford Allen claimed VAR is adding value and accuracy to the game, despite a review showing a big increase in wrong decisions in the top flight.
We spend in the regions of, I think it's 120,000, depending on your league position. That's 2 players to me. So for what we're getting out of it, no, 100%, I would rather take the 2 players. They're going to make mistakes, and everyone's doing it to the best of their ability. They're trying to improve it. They're trying to be open in terms of the improvement and asking for everybody's opinion. Ultimately, I keep going back to what I said before. Do fans want it in football? Do fans enjoy it in football? And I think the general consensus that when I speak to people is no.
Rangers manager Philippe Clement says goalkeeper Jack Butland is totally ready to perform well again for England should Gareth Southgate consider the 30-year-old for his Euro 2024 squad. Butland has 9 caps to his name already, with the last of them coming in 2018, but the England boss admits he's keeping an eye on Rangers number 1 after his impressive season at Ibrox.
I can only say one thing: Jack is totally ready. Point. And that's what I see every day, and every game he's proving that. He almost didn't have any downfall in that in all those 4 months together. So he's a really, really top-class goalkeeper for me.
And some sad news with the announcement that the former Rangers, Airdrie and Scotland forward Ian McMillan has died at the age of 92. Seen here wearing the Rangers number 8 jersey against Celtic in 1964. McMillan played for the Diamonds before and after Rangers, for whom he scored 55 goals and won 2 league titles. Canada winger Junior Hoilett has been reunited with his former manager Neil Warnock at Aberdeen after leaving Vancouver Whitecaps. The 33-year-old played under Warnock at Queen's Park Rangers and Cardiff City, and the Dons boss believes that in signing him once more, Hoilett will bring a sense of calm and a level of consistency to Aberdeen's attack.
I always call him Mr. 8 out of 10. And I have had a few 10s out of him over the time I've had him. A few 6s as well, I suppose. But in general, he's a very calm and influent, nice lad as well in the dressing room. And I just feel we just need that little bit more on the bench to give us a few more goals here and there. Do you know what I mean? When I asked him, I mean, you know, I told him where I was and asked him if he'd come up. He said straight away, he said, yeah, I'll come up. Because he's enjoyed playing for me in the past.
There's live football in the Championship tonight as the top 2 tussle for what would be a huge 3 points for either side. Jonathan Sutherland is at Starks Park for us.
Strap yourselves in for the Championship game of the season so far. This top-of-the-table clash between Raith Rovers and Dundee United. Dundee United 4 points clear at the top of the table. They also have a far superior goal difference. This really does feel like a last throw of the dice as far as Raith Rovers are concerned in terms of trying to make this a title race. Wasn't that long ago they were 5 points clear at the top of the table, but the wheels have fallen off to a certain extent. They've lost their last 5 matches. Nevertheless, a sellout crowd expected here at Starks Park this evening. In fact, the biggest crowd here in 25 years, and that's despite the fact this game is, of course, on the telly. Join us for Sportscene, 7:30 on the BBC Scotland channel. It's also live on the BBC Sport website and BBC Sport app.
Scottish Rugby has announced that it is ending its Super 6 competition later this year as part of a restructure to develop more homegrown players and improve the link between the domestic and professional game, with Glasgow and Edinburgh introducing A teams. Ayrshire Bulls, Heriots, Southern Knights, Stirling Wolves, Watsonians and Boroughmuir Bears are the 6 teams who will be affected by the competition coming to an end in November, a decision that will be hard to swallow for Boroughmuir scrum half Rory Swan.
The kind of overwhelming feeling is a little bit of disappointment, not necessarily the decision itself. I think we pride ourselves on having a good community base, a kind of good feel around the club and culture. So, yeah, we're just disappointed that we're not going to get to kind of carry that on through beyond this season. But I suppose every decision's an opportunity elsewhere. But, yeah, I think the main feeling is that we're probably sad that the Bears won't be a thing.
To snooker now, and John Higgins is through to the last 4 of the Welsh Open, where he could meet Anthony McGill if his fellow Scot defeats Gary Wilson this evening. Higgins, who has won the Welsh Open a record 5 times, was up against Northern Ireland's Mark Allen this afternoon. The Wishaw veteran potted this long ball in the 7th frame on his way to a 5-2 win against the player who trails only Ronnie O'Sullivan and Judd Trump in the world standings. And just finally, within the last hour, Sir Chris Hoy has announced he has been diagnosed with cancer. The 6-time Olympic champion has posted on Instagram that he received the diagnosis last year. He said for the sake of his young family, he had hoped to keep the information private. And while he's thankful for the support, he would like to deal with this privately. In the post, he says he feels fine and is continuing to work, ride his bike and live life as normal. He said he can't wait to get stuck into an exciting year of work ahead, including the Paris Olympics in July. And we wish him very well, Sally.
We do indeed. And an upbeat statement, though, very much looking ahead.
Yeah, that's the way he is.
Thanks very much. And our best wishes to Chris. Now it's over to Fiona Stalker to find out what's happening on BBC Scotland at 7 o'clock.
Tonight, the death of Russia's most famous opposition activist, Alexei Navalny, as President Biden lays the blame at the door of Vladimir Putin. We'll have reaction from Professor Sir John Curtis to the 2 by-election results where Labour trounced the Tories and what it means with an election likely this year. And we're hearing from the stars of the hit Netflix period drama Bridgerton, ahead of its return for a 3rd series. See you in a few minutes.
Well, let's get the weather now from Chris. What delights have you got in store for us this week?
Bit of everything, actually. A lot of rain around tomorrow, Sally, and probably more in the way of sunshine on Sunday. So this weekend, the best day weather-wise, Sunday.
OK.
Thank you very much indeed. Very good evening to you. We had a bit of brightness around today, some sunshine breaking through the cloud at times, but in places that cloud was really quite stubborn. Some mist and murk with it as well, rather grey and overcast. Over the next few hours, it's still largely cloudy. A few spots of light rain or drizzle, some clear skies towards the Northern Isles, the far north and the northeast, and here overnight, temperatures in low single digits. Elsewhere, around about 6 or 7 Celsius as the overnight low. Winds beginning to pick up around the west coast by the end of the night because we do have a system on its way in through the course of the day tomorrow, and that will bring that rain I mentioned. First thing, it is predominantly dry, predominantly cloudy, and there will be a few showers just tracking their way eastwards, affecting Edinburgh, Dundee and Aberdeen. Then mid-morning, still dry and cloudy for many, and there's the rain pushing in sort of around about lunchtime for the west coast and the Hebrides. So mid-afternoon, it's an east-west split. In the west, under the cloud and rain, pretty soggy, not great. 12 degrees, though, still mild. In the east, hopefully still dry with a bit of brightness at this stage. But you can see towards the Highlands and Islands that rain will be fairly heavy and persistent. And actually, it will reach all parts as we head through towards the latter stages of Saturday. Quite breezy and chilly in Shetland. So for those hill walking or climbing, certainly across western ranges, turning increasingly wet. Windy too from the south, and those winds gusting perhaps 60 to 70 miles an hour as that heavier rain crosses. In the east, it's drier for longer, but still fairly cloudy with fairly low cloud bases as well, around about 300 metres. Now, as we head in towards the evening, that rain continues to track eastwards, reaching all parts, so it's a pretty wet and soggy Saturday evening and Saturday night, but it's clearing through at a pace, and that means for the second half of the weekend on Sunday, it should be drier, should also be brighter. That rain still with us initially in Shetland, but it should clear. And then it's a case of bright spells and a few rain showers tracking their way eastwards through the course of the day. Always more in the way of cloud across western parts of the country. Best of the prolonged sunshine in the east and mild for all, temperatures into the low teens. So that was the weekend. Next week, we still have low pressure systems barrelling in off the Atlantic, so it's rather unsettled, cloudy, wet at times. And then by the end of the week, something a little bit cooler as well. So you can see on the outlook there, from Monday onwards, it is unsettled, cloudy with some outbreaks of rain, a few bright spells. But the general trend by the end of the week and into the weekend is for things to turn colder. That's the forecast for now.
Does that mean snow? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
Maybe the following week, Sam. I'll keep you posted.
Thank you very much, Chris. And that's Reporting Scotland. And McAlpine will be here with your late news. That's at around 10:30 tonight. But until then, from everyone on the team, do enjoy your evening. From Chris and me, bye-bye.